Hi guys, you've already seen that there are different types of addresses assigned to our EC2 instances. So we have public addresses, private addresses, and then there's also elastic IP addresses. So I want to go over the differences between these. So we have our AWS account, and in that there's an availability zone. And let's say we have two subnets within that availability zone. And we have an instance, and that instance has an interface in one of the public subnets. That interface has a private IP address, and it also has a public IP address. It then has another interface in another subnet within the same AZ. It also has an interface in another subnet with a private IP. So a public IP address is a dynamic address. What that means is it might change. So when you stop your instance and start your instance again, it will pick up a new IPv4 public address. The private address stays the same, but the public address will change. So that means you've got to make sure you don't use that IP address in application code because it could change at any time. So another thing we can do is assign something called an elastic IP. Now, an elastic IP is also a public IP, but it's a static address, so it doesn't change. Now, elastic IPs can be assigned to our network interfaces as well. So what we can do is associate the elastic IP with this network interface here. So this second address here, this public address, is an elastic address, and that means it's static and it won't change. So we can stop our instance, we can start our instance again as many times as we want. That address will always be the same. Now, what if our instance fails? And let's say we have some applications that are pointing at this IP address. What we want to do is assign that IP address to another instance. So what we can do, we have two options here. One of the things is we can move the elastic network adapter, because remember, we can move these between different instances within the same availability zone. So both ENIs and EIPs can be remapped to a different instance. So once we've done that, that means the second instance is now responding to any requests that are coming in to this IP address. And of course, you can automate this programmatically as well. Now, another option is, what if you have a failure, but you want to be able to fail over between availability zones? So you want to be able to protect in case an availability zone fails. Well, now we have an instance in a separate availability zone. It also has two network interfaces, and what we're going to do is move the elastic IP address. So EIPs can be remapped across availability zones, but remember, the elastic network interfaces cannot. They're within an availability zone. So you can remap them to a different subnet in the same AZ or a different instance in the same subnet, but you can't remap them across availability zones. But you can do that for the elastic IP address. So let's just summarize the key differences. Public addresses are dynamic. They're lost when the instance is stopped. They're used in public subnets. You don't pay for them. And they are associated with a private IP on the instance. You can't move them between instances. Private addresses are retained when the instance is stopped, and they're used in both public and private subnets, so you always have a private address. And then elastic IP addresses are static public addresses. You get charged if you're not using them. So if they're allocated to your account but unused, then you will pay a fee for them. They're associated with a private IP on the instance, and they can be moved between instances and elastic network adapters. That's it for this lesson. Now, there is a little bit more theory, and then we're actually going to get on with using elastic IP addresses in the console.